You know, I love that the Kennedy Space Center is right down the road from us. If you've not been, you need to take a tour, maybe even a great church trip. There's so much history there. I'm fascinated by all of it. I remember, in fact, it was Uncle Bob, you know, Teresa back there, when Aunt Alice, before she was widowed, was married to Uncle Bob. He took me on Family Day to the Kennedy Space Center.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did. Now I don't know where everybody else was at, but
He didn't
whatever.
take me. I know.
Sorry. And he actually, Aunt Alice, Uncle Bob took me to Family Day. I don't know what you were doing, but you're probably being bad.
Probably grounded.
Probably grounded again. And how old was I? Goodness. I want to say between 10 and 12 years old. It was the perfect age for a boy to go to see spaceships.
Maybe you two can go together, Teresa.
And I just remember seeing it through the eyes because he took me back to where he worked, where his office was, and got to see what was computers back in the day. You know, they filled up the whole room. But the shuttle was a really big deal. And watching an astronaut take something the size of a Rubik's Cube, it's a shuttle heat tile, and he placed it in a kiln, which is what, you know, you make pottery in this thing. When he opened it up, he took these tongs in there, and the thing glowed like the sun. And everybody is like, wow, this thing just pulled in all that heat. Then he picked it up with his hands. And he grabbed it by the corners. And he said, this thing is so pulling the heat away that I can hold it. And within 10 to 15 seconds, he placed it on the flat part of his hand and held it. We were just in awe. I mean, all these years later, it still sticks with me of the technology of those heat tiles on the shuttle. See, that's a big difference from July 16, 1969, right there at the Cape Canaveral, was a Kennedy Space Center at the time, that the largest man-made object, moving object, launched the Saturn V rocket carrying the Apollo astronauts. And on July 20th, 1969, they made it to the moon. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theory. You want to stay up late one night with a bag of popcorn, we can hash it all out. Because I'm a big time watching goofy television to find out, you know, is the moon hollow? Are there aliens out there? Did we really land? You know, all of it. If it's cheese, I'm there. I've got the crackers for it. But it's one of those that I love that kind of stuff. But in the end, I realized 400,000 people worked on the Apollo program. And not only satellites, telescopes, all of it are good enough today that we can see the tracks that the lunar rovers made. We know somebody was there. And as fun as it is to look at all the conspiracy theories, probably one of the greatest achievements of mankind. No, I don't think Stanley Kubrick, did the film to fake the moon landing. I think we went there. In fact, 24 men have walked on the surface of the moon. And I just sit back and I'm in wonder and awe. Now what's interesting is, if you were to launch a rocket, and the moon is right there, are you going to aim the thing right at the moon? Why? Because it's not going to be there. You're going to, now that's what I would do. You know, I'm not Galileo. I'm sure that the Magellan would have something to say about it, but you're exactly right. I'm going to tell you a story from just days ago. About a boy who was not living up to his potential. 18, 19 years old. He got himself into serious trouble. And he would describe himself as an entrepreneur at 18 and 19 years old. Now, if you could imagine in Daytona Beach what that might mean. Thank you. Thank you for your acknowledgement. It was not me. But he tells the story. At some point, as life is going off the rails, and he thought he was living a big life, and his dad, who recently passed, sat him down and said, if you don't change, you're going to die. You mean literally? I don't know if it's going to be physically, spiritually, emotionally, but you're going to die. And that boy at that moment tells me, he said, I don't know what it meant or what I needed to do, but it's like he grabbed the wheel and just turned it a degree or two. Because I wasn't willing to change much more than that. But on the trajectory of going from the earth to the moon, what does 1 or 2 degrees do?
You miss it.
You're not kidding. That kid decided he didn't like his dad. It was going to prove him wrong. Good. Prove him wrong. Changed everything. He just recently finished his 2nd master's degree. And he has spent most of his time over the last 25 years working in the space program for NASA. Quality control engineer. There's so many things that are up over our head right now that has his name on it. Because somebody grabbed a hold and changed the trajectory. Sometimes we need people in our world, not to turn us all the way around. Have you ever gotten angry when you're working on something? Let's say it's a Phillips head screw. And you're trying to loosen it, and it doesn't want to. If you get a bigger screwdriver and you apply more force, have you fixed the problem? Sometimes. And sometimes what happens? Oh, you'll round that thing out. You'll find that the screwdriver is a lot tougher than maybe a brass or a softer metal. And then suddenly you've just got this hole. And then you have to go find another tool to fix what your other tool just did. And half the time, that tool, which you've paid extra money for, it doesn't actually work. And at some point, you're just ready to throw the whole thing away. Sometimes when people come at us with a bigger screwdriver, don't worry, I'll fix you. No, you're not. You're probably going to snap me right off. You ever have somebody just torque you the wrong way? You're going to run into people who may only need a degree or 2. Oh, we want to, if we're going to change somebody, we want to change them upside down, inside out. Yep, we want it all to be. Sometimes people have to make their own decisions. They have to be just slightly navigated. So that 1 degree over a course of time, I don't know how many times parents, when they want to fix their kids, I want it all right today. Hey, this is, discipline needs to be there. Your hand needs to be there. Your guidance needs to be there. But they will not be in the image of you by the end of today. Because that kid's 12 years old. Or 8 years old. It's always amazing to me when I'm in, say, Walmart, and I hear a parent cussing and screaming at a small child. Because you know what's going to happen one day? One day, that child is going to be eyeball to eyeball or standing over that, and there's going to be a mom that's going to have a 14, 15, 16-year-old yelling and cussing and screaming and throwing things and slamming doors, and they're going to go, I don't know what happened. We all know exactly what happened. Dr. Frankenstein, there's your monster. Now sometimes a kid can get in trouble all on their own. God was the best parent in the world. Only had 2 kids, 1 rule, don't eat that. What did they do? thus the nature of children. But did he have a guiding hand? Yeah, he did. Even in their free will and calamity, I will set the rules. You're not going back here. And you ate something you weren't supposed to, now you're not going to be able to eat this. You thought the tree of knowledge was so tasty? Now that you have that knowledge, you won't have the tree of life. And he continued to guide because it was all leading somewhere. Small things matter. And as we, as a church, as a people, as God's people, we want to do great things, we want to do big things, and we've got some great plans for this church. They're all wonderful. But sometimes it's the simplest of things that make the biggest of differences. Listen to what the Master said, because it makes all the difference in the world, because we're looking for the grand things we can do. Let's all go on a mission trip to the far side of the world. Now, this church can spend a lot of money. We can go to the far side of the world. And there are people there that need Jesus, they need your love, they need your acceptance. Can you imagine this church if you went to some other countries and you offered the love and acceptance that you have here to people that just their very existence makes them illegal? How they would react with your love, your embrace? I want you to hear this. You heard Matthew. He's recording this. Jesus is speaking. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in the heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he'll put the sheep on his right and the goats to his left. Now listen to this. Then the king will say to them, this is what you heard earlier, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world." And he's going to tell you the criteria. Because you traveled to the far side of the world. Because you moved mountains. Because you know these words. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I'm sorry, what is your criteria for godliness? Is it like the ascetics who would beat themselves with bushes until their backs bled? This body is evil, this body is evil, this body is evil. That's why entire groups of people said Jesus couldn't have been the Son of God because he was in a fleshly body, and the body is so evil that it couldn't possibly be divine. That's part of the heresies that began in the early church because people already had preconceived ideas of what holiness was. Have you punished yourself enough today? Have you gone off to some convent somewhere, some monastery to lock yourself away? Have you denied yourself everything this world has? He says, I'll tell you what will separate the sheep from the goats. I was hungry and you fed me. Lord, can I get you a sandwich? I mean, if that's what it... No, then he continues on. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Lord, but I needed clothes, and you clothed me. Lord, when did I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. I remember being in college, and I volunteered for the prison ministry in Nashville. I was 19 years old, and I was like 145 pounds. That's a lot thinner than I am now. I was probably 60, 70 pounds lighter than I am right now. Serious. I'm probably 220 pounds right now. Somebody do the math on that. What? Oh, I love you. Those are called cataracts. Doors fixed.
Break Lowe.
That's what I'm saying. No, I'm about 215, 220 right now. So you have to see me at 145 pounds. 160, I felt really good. I felt like I was bulky. I remember walking into the Nashville prison. There's no air conditioning. There's some big people searching you top to bottom before you're going to be let in. I've never been pat down. I've never been searched. When you hear that door slam, bam! And the next one opens. You know you're not getting out until somebody opens that up. And I'm talking about some of the biggest, burliest, toughest, roughest people I've ever seen. We walked into a library that maybe was just the size of the back of this building back here with old, nasty pews. I don't know who donated. Books that look like, you know, they came on the ark. And this is supposed to be the library. The windows are open. Flies are everywhere. And I'm sitting in a pew, and two of the largest men that I feel confident are murderers. Because you just don't look like this without being murderers. It looked like angry, mean football players were on each side of me. And they were just so thankful. These kids showed up and considered them to have value. One of the most meaningful communion services I've ever had. Oh, the crackers were stale. Flies everywhere. It really felt like a third world country. Those men were just thankful that somebody spent a moment, that they were not forgotten. So this makes sense to me. I was in prison and you came to visit. And just like the disciples, they began to call out, when the righteous will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry? And feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes, or when were you in prison and visit you? I will remind you that as Jesus is starting his ministry, about 4 weeks ago, I gave you a sermon where Jesus is just tired and he wants to sit down, and he plops himself down at a well, and what does he want? He wants to drink water. Who's there? A woman. Has she been married? Yeah, a whole lot of times. Remember the lady that just remember back then, if you wanted to put somebody away, if a man was tired of a woman, all you had to do is go, I break with you. I break with you. I break with you. That's a divorce. That's a first century divorce right there. Can you imagine how many hotheads out there must have gone through people like Kleenexes? Do you understand how precarious relationships must have felt if somebody had the kind of power to speak those words and you were now homeless? You couldn't own property. You had very little rights. And here's a woman, 5 different men have looked her in the face and went, I break with you. And she's got somebody else at home now. Jesus just wants water. She gets upset to go, do you know who I am? You're the woman with a ladle. Would you just hand me some water? Please? Let me tell you, you're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan. You don't even talk to us, much less a woman, much less a woman who has a reputation like mine, that I have to come to the well at high noon. Nobody's here at noon. You know what? I don't mow my lawn at high noon. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock tonight, if you're a lawnmower, it's probably me. Because I'm not going out there in the heat of the day. She went out in the heat of the day because no one else would bother her. Jesus just wanted water. You ever been that thirsty? See, they're all asking the question of when did all this happen? The king will reply, and I'll tell you the truth, that whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, You did that for me. Then he'll say to those on the left, depart. Wait a minute. Why? Well, because I was hungry and you didn't feed me. Of course we would give Jesus food. But what about the other guy? And he goes through that list of naked and poor and imprisoned. See, there's people right now, I would walk right out of here. If they needed me, boom. I'm sorry, people, you don't need me as much as this person here. Have you ever gotten that call? I gotta go. Jesus is saying, I appreciate the fact that if it really was me, you'd drop everything. But until you see that woman over there, you see, the woman at the well was the first time Jesus announced something that no one else had heard. What was it? I'm Jesus. I'm the living water. If you're thinking about wanting water from that well, I'm the living water. I can give you water that you'll never have to come to this well and be ridiculed again. Wouldn't that be nice? She goes, I want that water. And he's trying to explain it's not actually water. It's living water. It's what will renew you from the inside out. You're seen as the reject woman who can't keep a relationship that nobody wants. You're the person who has to come at high noon, sweating down to your very sandals just so that you can sustain life. You're probably having to drink as much water as you're sweating at this moment. And I'm telling you, I see you. You have value to me. I would die for you. Guess what she did? She went, leaving that place, telling everybody about the man. He changed her life just a small degree with water. You don't know today whose life you're going to change. And you don't have to give a kidney. You're not going to have to travel to the far side of the world. Now, if that's your calling, go. But there may be a neighbor who just needs a kind word. Somebody that needs a pamphlet, a business card, a word of encouragement, a text message, a note. I mean, when was the last time you received a handwritten note in the mail? I keep a garbage can right next to my mailbox. Spectrum, boom. Chase, boom. All these ads, nothing real, and they even try. You ever gotten a card, you go, who would have sent me an invitation? And then you realize that handwriting's a little too, it's a robot somewhere wrote it out to make it look like it's handwritten. And you open it up and it says, hello! And then it has your name written right there. Not a single person ever saw it. And where does it go?
Trash.
But when you get that card, when you get that handmade invitation, when you get the things that you go, oh, somebody thought of me. In today's world, if I have to send in a message to a company, let's say I have a complaint or a compliment, I go get my stationery and I break out my pen because it has such weight. Because we can send a text message. We can send off something online. I remember when I had my Chevy Volt. I've got 258,000 miles on it. It's a great car. And when it started to have an issue, I was so angry that I wrote the CEO of General Motors. Boy, I was just, I don't know how to do this. This is going to be too expensive to fix. You're making electric cars, and wow. 2 weeks later, the personal assistant to the CEO of General Motors calls me. Mr. Lowe, we got your letter. And Mary, who happens to be, wants to help you. Oh. They helped get it all fixed. Because they receive something personal. Something as tiny as a stamp saved me about $12,000. Because sometimes you can sway and change things just a degree or two. I don't need the CEO to fly in on a helicopter and present me with a new car like Bob Barker. I just need somebody to tell me how to make this little one part work. And actually we figured it out, and it becomes now the way that they fix that car. See, sometimes it's the smallest things. And right now, when God is wanting you to do great things, it may be going to the far side of the world, or it may be being salt and light by offering a cup of cold water. The scripture says, by the way, if you only have a cup of cold water, guess what God's only asking of you? A cup of cold water. God does not expect you to suddenly manifest something. Oh, look, this tragedy in Hawaii, I will personally come up with every penny to fix everybody's... God didn't ask you to do that. It's probably beyond you. But if you could do something. Now I realize there's so many needs out there, you can't address all of them. You would spend all of your time, all of your days, all of your energy, effort, money, even if it's the smallest thing. Because if all you have is a cup of cold water, if you tried to give all 8 billion people, I'm going to give everybody today on the planet a cup of cold water. You wear yourself out. See, Jesus didn't say you have to go find every stranger and every prisoner and every naked person and... But when the opportunity comes, what will you do? And I realize there's no way that you can help every single homeless person. There's no way that you can help with every single need. But it's like the story of the starfish. It's an old one. Remember? It's just that little boy walking down the beach. And the tide has flushed in all of these starfish. And he's just grabbing them and throwing them as only little boy could. An old man just standing there. The boy's wearing himself out, running up and down, grabbing them. He says, "Hey, son, you can't make a difference. I'm sorry. There's just too many." The boy picks up one more starfish, throws it back in the water, and he says, "I made a difference to them." You can't get to everybody, but you can get to somebody. With just what you have. Your hands, your heart, your love. If you don't believe your embrace means something, in chaplaincy, one of the most difficult things for me to learn is something called the ministry of presence. You've heard me talk about it. It's not what you say, it's not what you do, it's just being there. And after 900 funerals, I've learned my words mean very little. Sometimes just being there. That's what you want. You're standing by somebody's bedside in hospice or a hospital, it's just being there. It's holding a hand. Military chaplains, sometimes when they are in the most dire of circumstances, God's not going to suddenly drop down and change the battlefield. But for that one person whose hand you hold in the midst of all the noise, I promise you've made a difference. I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was thirsty, quenched me. I was desolate, alone, in prison. You came to see me. I pray this week you will be that person. It may change everything, even someone's trajectory by 1 degree. Would you pray? Father God, it is a prayer of thanksgiving that you give us the ability, even in our simple, lowly state, to have an influence. Maybe not to turn things 180 degrees. Maybe just one, which changes somebody's trajectory and where they end up. Help us to be that person in Jesus' name. Amen.